Clerics also have an identity problem. You'll find that this is a recurring theme in this series. I think that a lot of D&D classes have issues in 5th edition of figuring out what their identity is. What's the problem with the Cleric? The Cleric is conceptualized as this class that's sort of halfway between a weapon-using class and a spellcasting class. Sort of a divine gish, if you will. There's a couple of problems with that, particularly, well, here's the thing. It also was an issue in 4th edition, where the Cleric was kind of 2 separate classes in one. You had all the same features, but if you spec'd into Strength, you were a weapon-using class, and if you spec'd into Wisdom, you were a spellcasting class. And there was not much incentive to split between the two. And in fact, it's generally suboptimal to do so. Still got that cold. And in 5th edition, there's very little reason why you'd ever want to go Strength on a Cleric. Optimally, you are a spellcasting class. You can wear armor. You happen to be able to use weapons to some degree. Some Cleric subclasses even give you extra attack. Don't do it. It's pretty bad. You are a spellcasting class. You are a primary spellcaster. You are a full spellcaster. And in fact, oh man, there's birds. I always get distracted by animals in that direction. In 5th edition, your primary job is to cast Spirit Guardians for the majority of your career. Spirit Guardians is kind of an overtuned spell, and it is quite powerful. So why would you not spend your spell slots on that? And then your lower level slots can be for party support and buffing and whatnot. So if you're not concentrating on Spirit Guardians, you should probably be concentrating on, say, Bless or something like that, because Bless is maybe the best buff spell in the game. I think that's true. I want to say that's true. Bless is the best buff spell in the game. I'll stand by that. The best low-level buff spell in the game. Let me just cover my bases. There's probably higher-level ones that are technically better. But anyways, for the majority of your career, you're going to be doing Spirit Guardians. So how would I redesign the Cleric? Well, first off, I don't think Spirit Guardians really fits with the Cleric, so I'd probably take that out as a baseline option. I'd also, and you're going to be seeing this a lot with the full casters, I would revamp the entire Cleric spell list. The Cleric spells should be largely unique and largely centered around encouraging a melee weapon-using playstyle, so that you can return to this this ideal of the weapon-using magic user. The Cleric is going to appear at first glance a lot like a Paladin in this. But when I get to Paladin, you will see why they are different. I think a lot of Cleric spells should trigger when you hit with a weapon attack. And to be clear, your 2 main stats are going to be Strength and Wisdom. Strength to hit, and then Wisdom is going to govern your spells. I think Cleric spells that trigger when you hit with a weapon attack encourages you to really engage in that core fantasy that the Cleric is supposed to have. Whether it is you hit and then heal an ally, or you hit and then you sanction the enemy and give them weaknesses that your allies can capitalize on. But I think the Cleric returning to its position as a primarily support class would be very healthy for it. Because right now the Cleric is not a support class. A party of all Clerics barely support each other at all, but it's still an extremely powerful party just because each individual Cleric is so strong. The Cleric is, I think, the Cleric is top of A tier, generally speaking. The Cleric and the Druid kind of, if you don't consider the Druid S tier, then the Druid is top of A tier. But if you do consider the Druid S tier, the Cleric is the most powerful of the A tier full caster classes. So, you have a lot of really powerful spells, but I think tying a lot of them to weapon attacks, either empowering your weapon attacks, although probably keep that limited, because I think that should mainly be the domain of the Paladin. Your weapon attacks should not be doing a lot of extra damage, but they should be incurring additional rider effects. And I'd like to see a lot more of that. I think Channel Divinity is a pretty solid mechanic. It could just use some fine-tuning. I think Channel Divinity should be available every encounter. But that's probably just the 4E player in me. I think encounter powers and abilities that recharge every encounter is a really good design, and 5E's short rest mechanics really don't cover that. Like, what even is the point of a 1 hour rest mechanic? Is it supposed to be every encounter? No. It's in this sort of in between. This is a whole other rant here. It's this like in between territory where it's not every encounter, but it's also not once per day. It's unreliable. I think 5e short rest mechanic is bad. So I would reintroduce the 5-minute short rest, and have Channel Divinity be based on that. So you have Channel Divinity every round, or not every round. Wow. No, every encounter, and have more expanded options for that. There's not a lot specific because the cleric is a primary spellcaster and its spells are already pretty good. I don't think there's a lot other than just saying like, oh, reintroduce the short rest, or the 4E short rest, reintroduce healing surges, like these kinds of quality of life things. Other than that kind of stuff, there's not a lot else specifically that I could say. The cleric is not a poorly built class. I think it just suffers from some stagnation in regards to its spell list because you have a few really key, powerful spells that you're going to be focusing almost entirely on, which is not great for a highly varied playstyle. I do kind of think that I kind of miss the idea from 4th edition where like every deity has a feat for clerics and paladins, to be honest, that gives you an additional Channel Divinity ability based on what deity you worship. I think that was a really neat idea. It's really evocative, really flavorful, and the fact that feats are so rare makes that really hard to do in 5th edition. I think that's unfortunate, but it's probably not worth fixing if we were just doing class redesigns. Let's see, what else? Not Channel Divinity. What is it? Divine Intervention. Divine Intervention is such a friggin' bad mechanic. I'd strip that right out and replace it with something that actually works. So that's just an extra bullet point on its own. Divine Intervention is an awful, awful mechanic and should not have been printed in the state that it's in. Oh my gosh. But yeah, most of the rework of the cleric is going to be done in the spell list. And I think encouraging the cleric to indulge in its like weapon using, the weapon using part of its identity would go a long way towards making it feel the way that I think it's meant to. I think that the cleric is sort of envisioned as, you know, you're armored, you have a shield, and you have like a mace, and you're going to be going forward, and smiting might be a little bit the incorrect term, but you are going to be vanquishing the foes of your deity with divine might. Instead of just cast Spirit Guardians, and I'm going to dodge for the rest of this encounter. I think Spirit Guardians is... It's not even that it's overpowered, it's just that it encourages a particular play style that isn't conducive to fun. And in that way, I think it is a poorly designed spell. Well, that partly comes into play with like the concentration mechanic, and there's a lot of other factors that work into that. I think removing Spirit Guardians and giving the cleric a lot of other abilities to make up for that loss, because it would be a loss. That would be a significant nerf, the removal of Spirit Guardians. And I think the cleric needs to have other things given to it to replace that. So I don't want to nerf the cleric by removing Spirit Guardians, but I think removing Spirit Guardians would make room for healthier spells that would encourage a more active play style. And my voice is going out, so I'm going to call that the end of this video. But that's my rework on the cleric. I think the cleric is pretty close Like, there's not a lot to change, to be honest. I think just reworking the spell list, removing Divine Intervention, and making that go away entirely. That's like 90% of the rework that needs to be done.